In this episode, I sit down with Toby Pierce, who's famous for creating one of the biggest fitness apps in the world and selling for over $400 million. I interview him in his Adelaide penthouse. Thanks so much for having us, man. I've got to ask, how did you make your first $1 million?
It probably would have been the ebooks, like, very early on in our journey, selling effectively like workouts and nutrition advice or whatever, which was back in, I think, the end of 2013. We really started that. So first $1 million doing that, running ads on Facebook, doing email campaigns like back when it was
the good old days,
the wild west. Not a lot of the complexities today, but that was the first $1 million.
So the business model was create an ebook. And what was so special about the ebook? I know you've talked to me a couple of times around what you did different compared to every single other business out there.
Firstly, not many people were really using social media well at this time. And I always try to contextualize this, and you'll understand because we used to talk about this back in the day, right? Instagram didn't even have ads. It was a chronological newsfeed. There was no algorithmic distribution of content at this point, no videos, no messaging, real basic, which meant Instagram then was sort of like TikTok of today, that the exposure was just, huge. So we kind of had taken fitness, in a digital format, which was a little bit different to most people, product type and the product content that the consumers actually liked, which were girls. The girls hadn't really been targeted properly. We targeted them quite specifically. And we'd also kind of broken the convention of, work out for 30 days and get abs. And we kind of positioned it as work out to feel good and confident, which at the time was revolutionary, and especially for the female mindset as it relates to their health and well-being. So we kind of had, the reason at the time we got such great cut through was we had sort of this combination of parts, that went together to make it work. And then obviously, shortly after we had launched and kind of got all the other things I just said put together, we then, really started to build an internal capability around digital marketing, which, as I think everyone knows it now, but back in 2013 and 14, it wasn't really as prevalent. So we had a massive leg up on, all of our competitors.
Yeah. The one thing that I really took from your story as well with those ebooks was just how much better your product was compared to everyone else in terms of the length of the ebook, which how much longer was it?
Yeah, well, so at the time, there was other people in the industry trying to do similar things or whatever, and they were releasing 20 pages or 30 pages. I think collectively, I can't remember what the first version was. We updated them all the time anyway, but the first version would have been 250 or 300 pages or something like that, from memory anyway. And also as well, it wasn't so much just, here's some workouts. It was here's how workout programming works, and here's how we think about progression and periodization, and this is a reason why this stuff will contribute to weight loss. If you don't do this, then you probably won't achieve weight loss.
And that's what happened. It was this flywheel. It was kind of you're obviously acquiring customers because that's just what you do, but then the product was so good that everyone was literally getting abs. I remember all of my friends just got so fit in Adelaide. And it was largely because the product was so good and actually worked. The
one thing that we'd actually done really well with the brand and the product was that we helped to find a way to actually want to make people work out. Because there's some industry stats depending on the gym, but anywhere between 50 and 80% of members who buy a gym membership, after the day they buy it, they'll never go back. So and obviously you have to go to the gym to work out, right? And so in our space, I think that was one of the things that we really addressed. We found ways to break down the education barrier, which inherently increased confidence and competency, which therefore helped these, people to actually exercise. And then, to your point, in order to get the result, you have to exercise. So if you're exercising more, you're more likely to get the result. And then, and because the results were quite good, and the results not only being, physical, but very much mental and emotional, all the girls would tell all their friends about it. I remember there was at some point in time, early on in the journey, that most of the major big universities or colleges, over in America, they had groups of 50 to 100 girls that would work out together in small groups throughout the week. I mean, we lost, the word lost is strong, but we lost a lot of money because people would just share the ebooks. Digital security wasn't quite what it is now, obviously back then. But you could also argue that even that viral, gifting and sharing, loop to a degree helped build these small networks of women around the world, which then built the brand, which then built the opportunity for what happened later.
For sure. And then what did happen later? You've obviously got Sweat. Can you walk us through that transition?
1st of January 2014 was the very first workout book, but we had some other stuff before that. So that first year, kind of went from 0 to 100 really quick. I think within 2 years we were like on a run rate to do 25 million bucks a year in ebooks or something like that. I couldn't remember the exact number. Nothing like the entrepreneur mindset to kind of go, oh, I've got this great thing. Maybe I could destroy it and build something better. But no, for a lot of different reasons, there was a whole bunch of ideas floating around, and I pulled together some info that suggested that maybe the next big opportunity was subscription, and it was mobile, and it was video, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but an application basically. We built the app, which was initially on iOS and web. In hindsight, it was terrible, but it was also terrible at the time, and we kind of didn't like that, but we'd already sunk so much money into it. We'd kind of already pre-committed, but we put it out anyway. Got lots of complaints, but we ended up remedying that and then making that work. We released it on a whole bunch of other platforms over the following few years. We evolved the brand from Kayla to Sweat with Kayla, and then to Sweat, which was always part of this sort of, what we thought might be like a 5-year, mission to, build a brand platform for trainers to come onto for any woman in the world to work out, which was, later on in the journey, our, company purpose kind of became empower any body with fitness. And then obviously later on, we ended up bringing in a whole bunch of other content partners, expanding to, 190 plus countries. I think it was like 10 languages at the end, 100 million bucks in revenue, and then sold the company to a large conglomerate.
It's amazing. We kind of joked about the early days chronological feed, that it was easier back then. How would you make, if you could give advice to entrepreneurs out there, how would you make your first million nowadays?
I mean, if you had to look at it, categorically, it depends what your goal is. If you're trying to make your first million building something that could be $1 billion, versus making your first million for something that might only ever make a few $1 million, probably be quite different. But if I was to stick to the assignment strictly, it would probably be e-commerce, and it'd probably be a social media driven brand. Something like, I don't know what the product would be, but I'll be doing it that way. I think if I was kind of in it to do it quickly, I think the cycle of e-commerce products and the complexity is going to continue to increase. So that opportunity may not necessarily always be there.
And the ceiling's definitely there as well. You hit it quite quickly as well.
Yeah, and that's like quite an interesting point, right? And which is exactly the reason why I make the remark around, are you trying to make $1 million to get to $1 billion, or are you trying to make $1 million to get to a few million? Because they're kind of fundamentally different businesses.
To get optionality, to get your passive income.
Yeah, correct. And so I kind of say, like, in that regard, we experienced the ceiling at Sweat of like the business model in stages. In the sense that every time we kind of butted up against this, we're like, oh, we can't really grow through that. What do we do? And then make minor pivots or slightly augment the company to allow us to move forward. Everything's got a ceiling. You just want to try and find something that has a big ceiling.
What was the biggest mistake you made when you first started out? Probably with Sweat, but also maybe ebooks, maybe just a lesson.
I think one probably was I didn't spend enough time building my people management and leadership skills early on. And I think frankly that was as a result of I had no awareness what it was. And it's really easy early on to kind of say oh, it's the people's problem. But at the end of the day, you hire the people. I didn't probably recognize that enough. The second thing probably is I probably suffered a little bit from the Dunning-Kruger effect, overconfidence when compared to my actual true competency level, in relation to human-centered design or customer centricity, however you want to kind of think about it. I would often say to myself doing what the customer wants, which was really, I heard some complaints, and so we did the complaints. But complaints only represent a tiny portion of what the true customer desire is. And so if you're only listening to complaints and only building that, you're kind of building a business based off of a squeaky wheel, if that makes sense. Squeaky wheel gets changed first, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's the thing that you should be putting all of your attention into, if that makes sense. For us, that definitely led us astray a few times. When I say led us astray, it's do a wrong partnership deal or invest in feature sets and in technology that are expensive, that don't add value or whatever they might be, stuff like that is quite costly.
Makes sense. When I just kind of started Calming Blankets and I went up we had breakfast at Pickle in the Middle or whatever it's called. And I was like, oh, should I sell? I think the offer was $3.5 million for my business. A year later, I got offered 16 million. And then a year later, I got offered 30 million. And you told me not to sell because you were like, the fear never goes away. There's no point selling at this stage.
The fear, and the fear has no relation to a good decision anyway, right?
Definitely doesn't. No, I appreciate it. Does money buy happiness?
Short answer, I would say no. I think you'll see on the internet, right? You see all these anecdotes where someone goes oh, money doesn't buy you happiness, but I'd much rather be crying in my, Ferrari or whatever the quote is. I don't really agree with that in the sense that if you're crying, you're still crying. If you're upset, you're still upset. However, I would say potentially on the contrary to that, although money, you can't necessarily buy things that will make you happy forever. I don't really subscribe to that. But in some regard, I would say there is a practical utility to having what I'll use in inverted commas as enough money to not have a lot of other problems that, a struggled financial position might put you in. And so when I say that, I kind of put it in inverted commas because having heaps of money or having a lot of money doesn't necessarily actually provide you the things that you deem that you need, because what you deem you need is normally relative to your means. If you've ever heard of like this definition of wealth, right? But, one of the greatest definitions of wealth that I ever heard, and it was one word, is that wealth is surplus. And so if you make $50,000 a year, but you live on $40,000 a year and you have financial security and, joy in your life and peace and whatever, technically you're far wealthier, than a person who makes, $1 million a year, but spends $1 million a year.
It's leveraged up.
Correct, because they're constantly, it's constantly fear-driven decision. It's fear-driven motivation to work to make the money. Whereas the guy or girl who's on $50K a year living on 40, it's like,
Yeah. I heard a good quote that once you make money, you're only left with problems that money can't solve.
For me, it was a super interesting experience. So earlier in my life, my financial situation was, simply described as not that great. I had a lot of financial difficulties, not from frivolous use of my money, but not really having enough money to actually, eat and live and whatever. I think that the desire to not be like that, and to not be in that position had definitely provided me motivation along my journey. And, I've been very fortunate in some parts of it to have a little bit of success. However, the deal gets done and some money comes into the bank, and this is probably incredibly anticlimactic for those people who are one day hoping to have an experience that's similar to this, but you do that, the money hits the bank and you go, hurrah. And I don't know if you like to drink or party, maybe you drink or party and you celebrate, great. A few days later though, you'll wake up and it'll be Monday morning or whatever day it is. And for me, it was Monday morning. We'd exited, I'd worked some time, some money had came through, and my kind of role had finished up, and so I was no longer working at Sweat. And I kind of vividly remember waking up, I get up, go to my local cafe, have my breakfast, and I come back here. My house was empty because I didn't have any furniture or whatever, I just bought it. And so, sitting around, it's like 9 a.m, no messages on my phone, no emails, no important tasks to get to, no huge fear that I have to do something because if I don't, that my world might end. I'm safe, in all intents and purposes of the word, from a financial perspective, have decent financial and life security. And I was like, holy shit, now I've got no time left in my life. And that was my first thought. I was like, I have no time left. What am I gonna do with my time? I've done nothing, I've achieved nothing. And so the human brain's a fascinating thing, right? Pretty much spends all of its time figuring out what is your current most significant fear and how can I put a huge amount of your energy and emotion into that? Whether it be like survival or reproduction or whatever it may be. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, holy shit, I've only got, I was, 29 at the time, I'm turned 30 this week, which is glorious.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but, 29 at the time and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've only got maybe, 40 good years left? And that sounds ridiculous.
It sounds ridiculous.
So I've only got 40 years, which is longer than I've been alive, but I'm sitting there, I've only got 40 years left. And so I started going through these thoughts. I was like, although the people were hard sometimes, I really like those people that I work with. And I was like, although there was lots of stress and problems that, that were work related and the complexity and, long days and, a lot of stress that comes with that, I was like, there was so much good enjoyment. Yeah. And it was so energizing and, less towards the end than at the start, but just the learning opportunity and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, now what?
Yeah. A lot of people say that after their first exit, their second venture is more enjoyable because even in the stress, they enjoy it more.
Oh, absolutely. And I experience it with, with one of the other companies, that I own, you know about. We, in that business, I don't work in it, per se, I'm not a full-time employee, but I kind of help to manage the organization and govern and drive it. And we have all the same problems, all the same experiences and difficulties and whatever in that business that I had in Sweat, but you kind of you're less shocked by them. You're less worried by them. You've got a proven path and playbook to put in place. And so instead of being worried about all of that, you actually get to spend most of your time being we're going to build this and we're going to go here and it's going to be massive and awesome. There's so much less, stress and worry.
Yeah.
So
if you could give it all up and be 18 again, but know everything that you know, would you do it?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe. The debate is between, it really is do I back my capabilities, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I reckon maybe I'd spin the wheel. I reckon, because it's 12 years or whatever to make it all back.
It's a long time. You might need to stop and smell the roses a bit more as well.
Yeah, enjoy it a bit more, for sure.
Exactly.